All right. So again, my name's David Krings. I'm living in Schenectady. And for my presentation, I picked something that's hopefully not controversial, but still interesting. For I don't know, almost all my life, I collect stamps, and decades ago, pretty much everybody did this. Like, I don't know, collected stamps or coins. Maybe around here it was more into baseball cards. People still do that. But I basically collect for now about like 40 years stamps. And one of the things that's in the beginning out of a necessity was that my budget for this hobby is zero. I don't spend any money on it. At least that's the intent. I did buy first day covers. I did buy from the U.S. Postal Service for a while. They had really nice, pretty like big, large posters. I framed them up, and there's like pictures on the wall. Unfortunately, I don't have that anymore. But those are the very few exceptions where I would spend money on, and yeah, buying an album or the stamps. But so if I don't buy anything, where do I get the stamps from? Well, I get them from friends and family. I have a box at work where people can drop their stamps in. And I also once went out and put something on Craigslist. It's like, oh, if someone has stamps, I take them. And first response, I go, yeah, I have a small bag. So I went and picked them up. I basically just put them outside on the front door, on the door handle, and I just go in there, grab the bag. And then someone else responds like, oh yeah, I got a fairly big bag of stamps. I put them in the mailbox where my place or where the person lived. So I went there and yeah, I was in the mailbox, pulled the plastic bag out, and a week later they messaged me. It's like, oh, I have more. They're next to the mailbox. That was kind of weird. But then when I went there on that same day, there were like 6, 7, I think even 8 like big shopping bags full of stamps. And it turns out that their aunts used to work at the Albany DMV, and during the 50s and 60s, she basically kept like all the stamps of all the letters that the DMV ever got. So, and now I had like a whole big bulk of stamps.
So were these people giving you stamps or envelopes that had stamps?
Envelopes or just the stamps, like the corner where the stamp is, just rip it off the envelope. So that's how I get all of the stamps that I have. Now, why do I even collect this? I mean, when you think, I mean, everyone knows what a stamp is, I guess. Did any one of you ever collected stamps? No? So a stamp from its original intent, it's a tool. Like the postal services want to be paid for the service they provide. And in order to verify that a piece of mail was paid for, like 200 something ish years, the postal service of Ton and Taxis, happens to be in Germany, came up with the idea to invent a piece that they, or something like a receipt they could attach to this, and as soon as that was on there and basically postmarked, they would know that whoever brought this into the postal service office already had paid for it. So it really came out of a bare necessity to provide a service. And for the postal services, or in general, a stamp is like a one-time use thing. So you buy it, you use it, and after that, well, unless they forgot to cancel it, you can never ever use it again. So it's kind of weird that all postal services in the world put at times excessive effort into creating these stamps.
Sorry.
Yes.
So you mean you could resend mail with the same stamp?
Yeah, if the stamp, basically the way these days how they know that the stamp was cancelled, basically the postmark, the black or the red ink that's on there Like on the post office, when you give them the,
Um,
they basically just
I've never noticed that. So they
yeah,
sample what is
they
that?
stamp basically on there, and it has the origin, like which post office or which sorting center came from. The date is always on there, and typically the time of day um, in hour. So when you put something in at 8 or 9 in the morning to the post office, um, and those cancellations, those postmarks, they vary a lot, which is like a whole other interesting story about those. But you basically would see, like in the morning, they would have an 8 on there, and then in the afternoon would have a 15 or something else, or they say 8 a.m. or 3 p.m. To basically to know when exactly this letter was basically given to the postal service and then gets out to be delivered. So one of the reasons why they, and I will show examples of how elaborate stamps can be. Um, one of the reasons is to prevent like making counterfeit stamps. Same way as we have like these elaborate graphics on money bills, the coins, or anything that is of particular high or perceived higher value, like clothing in the store. They have like this electronic tag on there. I mean, it's not artwork, but it basically serves the same purpose that you basically can't just walk off with it, or they put like special markers on there that identifies this as a genuine piece. This is really from the company or produced by the company. That's where the name is on there, not someone else who just fakes it. So and that's why the more elaborate you make the stamp, the more difficult it is to basically copy. So that's one of the reasons why there's a lot of different variety and different pictures on there, or like items on there. And the other thing is, and that I have examples of that as well, it is a very, well, it's almost a perfect propaganda tool. So to basically, and you was in the previous presentation, like people tend to be proud of their country. So this is like the National Postal Service. They want to present their country or their service or their thing in the best light. Look how great we are. Even to this day, I have stamps. I think it's like a current series of Germany where they present inventions that were made, that originated in Germany. It has nothing to do with paying the money for the letter. I mean, why did they pick that? But that is basically to demonstrate or to show to the people who live there, but also people outside of the countryside. Look what we have done. And this is something that's common across all countries, all postal services. Everybody does that. They basically present the achievements of their country in the best light possible. And some of these things are true achievements, like first space flight. Yeah, Soviet Union put a stamp out for that, and they made a big deal of it. Rightfully so, because they really were pioneers at that time. Otherwise, it's a bit questionable when some countries showcase their cars that are known not to be of great quality. Kind of find a bit silly, but nevertheless, for them, it is still important that say like, hey, we did this. May not compete on an international level, but still we did this. So the stamp is a tool to basically push this and advertise and bring that to the masses. These days, like stamps are printed in the millions for each of those issues. The numbers vary depending on how likely those stamps will be used. Typically, the Christmas stamps or like or whatever Hanukkah or whatever else the U.S. Postal Service brings out, they tend to put them up in higher volumes because that's when everyone sends like Christmas cards out at the end of the year, whereas the rest of the year they probably don't do this. And some, like these days, some people don't do it at all anymore. That's one of the reasons. But it's also, and that's what's fascinated me about especially getting all these stamps like from the 50s and 60s from the US, like which topics are used. What do these stamps present? What are the things that were worthy enough or found to be important enough to make a stamp for? One of the stamps brought the catalog. I mean, even if you don't collect stamps, like that's basically one of the issues. I bought it used because I just needed a tool to look up from which year those stamps are, so that I can sort them by year. But this is kind of every, or pretty much every country or a lot of regions have like the stamp catalog. Like this one, the Scott one, happens to be the one for the US, and they got like everything in there. I mean, and what I like about the stamps as well, and especially like the US Postal Service, they issue like absolutely fantastic, beautiful stamps. I mean, they got like, I mean, it's like an art gallery just looking at these things. And some of them are kind of like funny. They put like a panda bear on it, or the Mickey Mouse, or things like that, and flowers and trees and wildlife and all these things. So it's very one of the other motivations why I want to collect stamps is I collect art, and most stamps are made by artists. That is their profession. A lot of artists specialize on making graphics or like the pictures that go on stamps. They typically do other things because doing that doesn't pay too well. But still, they are very few people who actually do this and have like a knack for that. And like some of those stamps, when I look at them, they just pure beauty. I mean, they can, to me, they are about as valuable, as pretty, as worthwhile looking at as famous pictures in an art gallery. So, but in the end, as I said, it's really just a tool, one-time thing, and after that, they're trash for the most people. So, what's also interesting is to see like the differences in the cultures, and like even the development over the years. For example, one of the stamps, and I'm gonna put like markers in here. So we have, and it's explainable. I mean, it's for historical reasons. These are stamps that are issued from the U.S. Postal Service in 1942, and they basically have flags on them from all the countries that in most cases, Germany overran and occupied. So that is, as I said, like propaganda tool. Yeah? Look at all those countries, all those different flags of those people who were done wrong by this enemy of ours. Other things like this one, I don't know if you can look at it later. It basically has like the eagle on there, and it says like "win the war." I mean, how much shorter can you get the message than that? And you print millions of them and throw them under your people. This is, I mean, this is just genius. I mean, in this case, it's kind of like sad, the reason why this was done. But if you want to get a message out, make sure that you get it on a stamp. Or these days, get it on Facebook or Meetup. Or but at that time, that was, I mean, it's almost as good as radio or TV later on. The other thing, and there's like, I'm not going through all the examples here that were I found interesting. Was a series issued in 1970 about environmental protection. It says, save our soil, save our cities, save our water, and save our air. You think the Postal Service would put this these stamps out today? I don't think so. If they would put that out today in the current political climate, a lot of discussion would, they wouldn't even dare to print them. Yeah? And but in 1970, the way how a lot of people thought about these things were different, because before that there was very little of government regulation or like self-regulation by the industry. You wanted to build a factory and you have the money to do it, just get a plot of land and you put your factory on there. And whatever crap comes out in the end that you don't want to deal with, you just dump it into the river next to it. That's how companies operate. Only much later now they have to like dredge the Hudson for PCB and things like that. So the way of thinking changed over the years. And yeah, stamps are also always tend to be political. Other example that I found is it right here? That is a stamp from 1964. It's a stamp for homemakers, celebrating basically women who run the household. You think a stamp like that would fly these days? That would too generate a lot of debate, to cast women as being the ones who deal with the family at home, whereas the guy goes out to work. But those used to be traditional and generally accepted rules or roles of people. I mean, in this case, they also packaged it to commemorate, I want to quote this right, the passage of the Smith-Lever Act, and it was basically providing economic experts under the extension service of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. This legislation helped to improve home life. So they basically had legislation to make it easier for those people who basically lived in farmsteads and like in those like on farms, to basically help them from an economic standpoint or point of view, so that their home life was better. But still, even though the term homemaker, I mean, it's still used today, but it's probably not something where it's a common term to be used, because it is like cast a bit more negatively today than it was probably at that time. So those are really interesting aspects about stamps, and stamps are a history lesson. So all the stamps that are collected from like a range from about 150 years, that is a history book. So I have an art gallery, have different cultures. Since I'm one of the few collectors who actually collects everything, the majority of collectors focus on one area. They collect only stamps with dogs on them, or only ones with flowers or things like that. That's their area of expertise, and the willingness, the drive to have these things complete. Yeah, maybe it bothers me at times a little bit that I know there's a series of 6 stamps and only got 5, but I'm not going out and hunt down. It's not making it my life mission to get that one master. Others are far more intense about it, and that's why there are conferences, that's why there are clubs, that's why there are meetings where people come together to basically trade stamps. I give you 2 of these if you can give me that. Oh, that's just the value of the stamp just doesn't compare. Again, I don't care about value. I have no idea what my collection is worth. No, really don't care. Because to me it's not an investment. To me it's not anything where I say like, oh, one day I'm gonna sell it all and make a lot of money with it. That's not my motivation. But others see it as an investment. Same way as they do with collecting coins or baseball cards or anything else. Some people buy old cars that they fix up with the intent to generate value that they can, if they want to, need to draw from. That's not my intent. So it's also, as I mentioned, I basically collect everything from every country that I can come across, and it's also a nice geography lesson. Where are those countries? And even parting with history. Some of those countries that I have stamps from don't even exist anymore. Or new countries come to be. They all have a postal service. They now start to print their own stamps. I mean, this is interesting or like radical to some extent, but there's a very, even some of the smallest countries in the world, like Vatican City, it's very, I mean, it's like the size of Schenectady, but it's its own country and has its own postal service, and they issue their own stamps. They even stamps issued by non-countries. The United Nations issues their own series of stamps. So if you want to send something from the headquarters in New York to their other dependencies or other operations in Geneva, they basically pay money for the UN stamp, and that is in the denomination of the country where the UN organization is located. So the UN, United Nations in New York City, they would buy a stamp from the UN, but that's denominated in US cents, and they basically then pass it on to the US Postal Service for processing, typically, or they basically, or depends on what it is, they will basically provide the service or pay for the service in order to have it be brought to Geneva or Vienna or whatever else they are. So stamps from the United Nations in Vienna, they're in, well, now they're in euros, but they used to be in Austrian shilling. So those are things that up until a few years ago, where I came across these stamps and was like, which country is this? I was searching for it and couldn't find it. Well, it's not really belongs to any country. It's the United Nations.
So it doesn't say stamp.
Well, it says UN on it,
Oh,
but that could be just someone issuing a stamp to say like, hey, yeah, we joined the United Nations, or we are in there for 30 years now, or whatever the reason is. And countries do that. They say like, oh, 25 years UN membership. So it's not, at least to me, it wasn't obvious. Yeah, it says it on there, but
stamps
or it's even within the US, like the canal zone, the Panama Canal zone, where it was under US control, they issued their own stamps. It says canal zone on there. So these are to me just interesting facts about it. The other aspect that I find fascinating is that some of the postal services have like very set rules. Postal Service of Great Britain, every stamp they issue is basically the head of the Queen on it. Always. That makes them very easy to identify. If you see that Queen on there, it's probably from the United Kingdom or Great Britain. Once in a while it's a Canadian stamp, but yeah, this is, and there's like no exception. Those are, I mean, it's kind of obvious why they do that. Other rules are Sweden for the longest time did not issue stamps of living people, with the exception of the royal family. Like the Queen and the King, they would become like they would take pictures or drawings of them and issue stamps. And they changed that, or they made exceptions to that. You would think they would do that in the 70s with ABBA. No, it had to last until the 90s, till the pop duo by the name of Roxette were the first ones, other than the royal family, who got the honor of having a stamp in Sweden issued with their picture on. And I mean, just that to basically say like, oh, everybody else wasn't worthy of it, but we basically take like two pop singers who, yeah, they were wildly successful and very popular and presented Sweden in a very positive light across the world. But yeah, but basically at that point you almost put them equal with your king and queen of your country. And those are, I mean, really a pop duo. So, but those are just, to me, very interesting things to even the entire organizations or the postal services go to that extent and think about these things and basically put those rules in place. Like, no, we want to do it this way, we want to do it that way. Don't make exceptions out of our rule, except for that case. So those are things that at least I find just wildly fascinating because it tells a lot about how these countries see themselves and how they want to present themselves. And then, I mean, when I started off of put the proposal in for this presentation, I also want to talk about how to do good things with stamps. One good thing is put a stamp on a letter and mail that letter to someone. At least for me, it's always still to this day. I mean, mostly I get bills or junk mail. But it's always like the special feeling that, yeah, the mail truck is on the street. I got something. Something is in there. That's for me. I got a letter. I can't wait to run down the stairs, open that mailbox, and see what's in it. If that is a letter from someone that I like a relative or a friend, especially when it's unexpected, and especially when they have a nice stamp on it, it's one of the most beautiful things you can do or give to a person. So go and write more letters, because people, if they're anything a little bit like me, they will enjoy that. Or at least they will appreciate it. It's like, hey, you thought about me. Well, you sent me something other than just a goofy birthday card once a year. You put the effort in, you sat down, you took a piece of paper, you wrote words on it in handwriting, unless it's really crappy like mine, like half my letters I type, otherwise because I want people to have a chance to read it. But this is just a beautiful thing. It makes people happy. So that's one aspect how your opinion has. It's more about the letter than the stamp. If you put a pretty stamp on there, it's nice as well. The other thing is, since I tend to get a lot of stamps, chances are that I get a lot of the same stamps. So I don't keep them all. I don't see any point in having 20 times or 30 times the exact same stamp. Some have varieties, like some are printed on their crooked, so I keep those. Some have like a real nice postmark on it. It's like, yeah, this stamp was in this city on this date at that time. That's what the postmark tells us. And I actually brought that. I have a series of stamps. They're all the same stamp, but they are postmarks, pretty much all of them 1 day apart. So someone sent a letter to one person every single day. And that's what basically, I don't know what the backstory of those stamps are, but to me this is just, has like its own kind of fascination to it, to basically think about what is the story that this could be. And especially given the time where they were postmarked, it was like very turbulent times. It's like from Poland, Polish stamps. Which, by the way, those, if it has to be per country, that's why I brought them. I think the Polish stamps are the most beautiful ones. You can look at them later. So, but going back to why I basically have what I do with excess stamps. For now over 100 years, there's the organization exists for 150 years now. It's the von Bodelschwing organization. They're in Germany. Everyone in Germany refers to them as Bethel, because that's the name of the borough where they all are located. And they basically, for over 150 years, or close to 150 years now, provide services for physically and mentally handicapped people. The first started very small. They had like a small group of people where they figured like they still can be like full members of society if they get a little bit of help. And that's the help that they started providing. For that, they needed funding. They needed money in order to run those programs. The first thing is they did a second-hand shop. So people were asked to bring in their gently used or still good enough to use pots and pans and like housewares and things like that they themselves could use for their organization. But then they also figured that we can sell them to those who can afford the new stuff. We give them the service or the opportunity to buy this for a little money, and the money, the proceeds that we make from it, we can use to basically offer our services. The second source of revenue that they started with for about 100 years now is, they call it the stamp office. They ask people to send them cancelled stamps, or even they don't have to be new stamps. They take like anything on the paper, off the paper, entire collections, anything that looks like a stamp, stuff that people don't know what that is, but it looks like a stamp, so we send it there. A lot of less so these years, but like newspapers would do would raffle off a prize, and you have to ask a question, you have to write the answer on a postcard, and then mail it to the newspaper. Well, a lot of newspapers would keep those cards, and once everything was said and done and the prize was given out, they would basically take the whole thing, all those postcards, wouldn't throw them away, would send them to the stamp office, and then people there, handicapped people, would have their task is to basically process those stamps. And they do that to this day. They employ 120 people, and per year they process between 10 to 12 tons of stamps. Stamps don't weigh a lot. So just imagine 10 tons of stamps. That's a heck of a lot of stamps. Now what do they do with them? Some of them they basically repackage. You can find them on Amazon online, or they used to be more popular in department stores. They're like sheets like this big, where they have like some collects samples, like some stamps on there from a country, or it's like a series of stamps. But the bulk of the stamps goes into bulk. They are sold by weight to collectors. Basically, a bag, you buy a pound of stamps. And then what collectors do, they go through all of those, take the ones that they want to keep. And sometimes they find like something very valuable in there. So there's always the kind of like the surprise that, what do I get in this package, And then once they're done, everything that they don't want to use, basically sent back, gets processed again, and they keep on selling that. So that is not only a big source of revenue for them, it also, as I said, like gives 120 people meaningful work. They do something that is of value to someone else. They do something that basically helps funding the help that they need in order to ideally live on their own. That's the whole intent of this organization, to basically prepare people who otherwise wouldn't be able to do that, have a life that they ideally can live on their own. They have like other facilities there. I think they have like a carpentry, like a wood shop, and those people who go there to learn those skills, those are even marketable skills for commercial companies, and they would hire those people, and they have a real job, can live on their own, they get as much help as they need. The other thing they do is, for quite a while, is basically help children with cancer. They have like or want to build a new facility where these children are basically taken care of, especially for those who cannot or don't have access to other means of this type of healthcare, where they could go to a hospital, to a doctor, who do like some procedure with them, but they don't do anything that's specific to basically help the child overcome this illness, like this problem, and to help even the families who potentially face the death of their child. I mean, it's like a horrible thing that can happen. And to have an organization out there that does this, I mean, yeah, they're in Germany, but at least I know it because I come from there, but I think in general it doesn't really matter where this organization is. To be able to help them, to support this, by a stamp that you otherwise would just toss in the trash. I mean, how much simpler can it get to do something good and help people out? So what I do is I collect all those stamps that I don't want to keep, and once a year I basically send for the packet, and it's always nice or like interesting at the post office to basically say like, yeah, don't put that sticker on there. I want like real stamps on there. And if you don't go at, well, I don't tend to go at the time when it's like really busy. They actually, the clerks at the post office, they actually like that. So we can really, and then have like a little bit of frustration getting out from the customer from before I can just slap the, the postmark on there. So it's I don't know, simple pieces of art, necessity a tool, but I I like it very much, and I find it like wildly interesting. So I mentioned the Polish stamps. This is like the album that I have, and they, for whatever reason, like large stamps. I mean, really nice ones. Here's an example of ones that have butterflies on them, different ones. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful stamps. They have like cartoon characters on there. Series with dogs. It's like all variety. This is what I mentioned, like the series of stamps that I have. They were all like just postmarked like one or 2 days at the most apart. Like someone wrote all these letters, all the same person. And then some stamps, like here they are, where I question their actual practicality. I mean, there are even envelopes that are not big enough to like have a stamp used on those. So this is probably, I can only speculate, something that the Polish Postal Service issued because collectors are interested in this. Yeah. This one, I don't know if it's like, yeah, this one is unused, so it still has basically the adhesive on the back, and it probably was never intended to be used for actually mailing something. The other interesting thing is stamps come in all kinds of variations and forms and shapes. Triangular stamps are fairly common. Were issued like decades ago. I have several from African countries. Then the United States Postal Service were the first postal service to issue an octagonal stamp. The German Postal Service was the first postal service to issue a round stamp, and now there are more common round stamps. And the only postal service to ever issue this special kind of stamp was also the German Postal Service, stamps that smell. I mean, why the hell would you do this? Just because you can. And I mean, over the time they lose their smell power. It's, I have like one here, which, at least when I tested it yesterday. Basically, it's like the scent is heat activated, so you rub it a bit, and then you smell it. You can pass that around. It really smells like strawberry.
It's a stamp.
Yeah, it's a stamp. It's like they have a whole series of fruit: apple, blueberry. Germany.
Just smell the German stamp.
Yeah.
Never thought I'd say that.
Yeah. They have apple, blueberry, lemon, and the strawberry one. It's from my brother. He lives in Germany, and he loves to send me newspaper articles. I don't know why, but I like to read them, so it's really nice of him. So he puts like all stamps on there. So that's where I most likely got those from. So yeah, this is, I mean, what? Other things where I said like history lesson. Again, I'm, through my nationality, a bit geared towards Germany. It's like the historical, like the original, the first stamps were issued by the Deutsches Reich, like the German Reich, or like the oldest one I have, at least based on the postmark, is from 1874. Just happens to be a really nice postmark on this, so I can it's very easy to date this one. And before that was like these different like kingdoms or like dukedoms in Germany that would issue their own stamps. Like this is from Bavaria. If you, so this must be before 1870-ish. You know, so it's a history lesson, but I should have figured out the specifics about this. So what's interesting is that, in the late 20s, like 1927, 1928, Germany had, or a lot of countries had like a recession, and money lost value very quickly. In the beginning, not so much, not so fast, so they started printing out stamps with the values on there, 25 marks, 40 marks, like $25, $40 would be in the US. And then it goes on like with 10, 200, 400, 1,000. Like 1,000 marks for a stamp, yeah.
Is this a collector?
No, this is because there was inflation. Like recession, inflation, money lost value. So the service still cost or is the same, need the same value of the service, but they basically had to print stamps that matched those prices. And then inflation got so bad that they didn't bother or they couldn't keep up with it. So they would just almost daily like print the value on there. 100,000, 800,000, 5 million, like, or 5 billion. That around this time, Germans or in Germany, they invented the word million, and milliarden. Well, they invented milliarden, which is in English billion. So they invented or inserted like an extra word in there just to facilitate like those numbers. And interestingly, most of the ones that I have are not postmarked, which is unusual because you would buy the stamp and a day or two later you would have to use two of them or multiple ones of them because they lost value that quickly. So the one, what value that is, like the one that is postmarked with from this one, I got the dates wrong there. It's like from the 19th of November 1923, postmarked between 5 and 6 o'clock, I would assume in the afternoon, in Dresden, and that was for 2 billion marks. So when these things come up, as I said, history lesson. Then the war came.
And those were given. Those were given.
Yeah, I don't even remember where I got those from. What I know for sure is that I didn't go to the store to buy them. That I knew. There's like a few here where, as I said, it's used as a propaganda tool. Unfortunately, that's probably yeah, those are the kind of like the worst time in Germany. Like they prominently have Hitler on there. They have there's like a whole series of them. It's like they even wrote on there like Großdeutsches Reich, like the Great German Reich. As I said again, a propaganda tool, and like their technical progress that they made for mainly just absolutely horrendous like reasons, essentially to kill as many people as possible, which is horrible. Yeah, of course they put Hitler on there.
That's on there too.
Yep.
What's this? Hard to tell.
Oh, that's stamps for, they call it like the general government. Those were like all the like the Ukraine parts of Russia.
That's very interesting.
Where they basically occupied those countries. And yeah, even as an occupation force, you issue stamps. And then the war was over, and basically Germany in the form it was before didn't exist anymore. But they basically, all the provinces, they were reinstated. And that's why I don't have many for them. For a short time, the provinces issued stamps. Like this one is like from the province Saxony. And then again, Germany was under occupation up until essentially 1990. I think the small stamps, I mean, they are the same issue type of stamps from the US and British occupation zone in Germany. They have the same, but I think I forgot which one. There are different sizes. If the larger one was from the British one or the American one, but they. Where I grew up, there was British occupation. But I mean, when I grew up, that wasn't that they ran. I mean, that like 1949, that's where I basically gave the majority of power back to like German governments. And then also stamps like from the French occupation zone, and then the different states or provinces that were founded. And then basically after that, when there was like a national postal service again for Germany, they wrote on it Deutsche Post, like German Post. And the interesting part about this is, then it's 1949, Germany was split, like in East Germany and West Germany. They each had their independent postal services, and East German postal service printed like the letters DDR on there, like German Democratic Republic in translation, and it was on all those stamps up until late 1989 when political changes occurred. Like people. No. East Germany was like Soviet occupied.
And they're the ones that said democratic.
Yeah. Yeah, there was nothing democratic about it. But again, it's a propaganda tool. You put something on there that people think, well, everyone knew that it was like, but at least they tried to suggest that, yeah, we are the real democracy. We care about people. We listen to the little guy and do everything. No. So, but that's this political or this viewpoint gets reflected on stamps. And then in 1989, they basically had like political changes. People went on the street in masses and demanded change. We don't want this anymore. They didn't break stuff. They didn't do anything. Yeah, the government was concerned. They put tanks in the side streets in case they want to basically squash that uprising. but they didn't, because they were so like surprised almost by it. Their heads, they were like in a fog that they couldn't make a decision. They didn't know what to do. So what they did is they called Moscow. What are we supposed to do? Well, at that time Gorbachev was president of the Soviet Union, and he basically told them like, it's not my problem. We don't bail you out anymore. We don't back you with whatever you want to do. So they didn't apply force to it. And that brought up the political change in East Germany that made like very soon after, like the unification of the two Germanys possible again in 1990. But during that time, after that change and the unification, there were like, was I think not even a year that the Postal Service wanted to issue stamps. They no longer wanted to write DDR on there. So what did they write on there? Deutsche Post. Exactly the same that was like in the, what was like from 1947 to 1929, in that range. Which to me was like a very interesting choice. I mean, they could have come up with something else, but they chose that. To basically almost saying like, oh yeah, the last almost 50 years, they didn't happen. So, forget about this. Let's go back and start from here and do it again. That almost, I don't know what the motivations were, but that kind of like how it at least strikes me when I saw that. And, so this again is history lessons that you get from stamps. And just to, what I also collect is odd things. Okay, like a lot of stamps where there were like 5 or 6 all in a row. Also some of the US stamps that I got, those plastic bags. These are stamps, series issued by various European countries that basically get together and they kind of want to have a common design, ideally, for typically Christmas stamps. But there's also like one series about ecology in Europe. Think green. So, and that was stamps issued by Austria, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, and Germany. And then a few, like some of the postmarks or like postmarkings for express mail in the US. They were basically postmarked on the back or received at the post office at that time, gave it to a mail delivery person, the mailman on that time. That's all like printed in postmarks on the back. With even 30-cent stamps as a special delivery. So as soon as the postal service or post office would get letters like that, they would send someone out to basically deliver it. Wouldn't wait till tomorrow. It's kind of interesting concept that they did away with eventually. So like all these kind of things, and a few interesting ones. Like this one is like a small postcard for the publicity department of the Syracuse University Press, and someone asked for, it's basically a request, resides your catalogs, please send us regularly all your new releases, or besides your catalogs, please send us regularly all your new releases. Also, we have a request to comment on a wandering student, any better copy will do, best wishes. It's weird. That doesn't make any sense to me, but this was basically on things that were sent out. And I have a few others. Very, one of probably the oddest piece that I came across is yeah, this one is a fairly more recent one. I just kept it because the shape of the postcard, I mean, it's like spam, but like who gets the idea to basically advertise a furniture store with a postcard that looks like furniture?
Pledges through the mail.
Yeah. And I once got an envelope where someone paid or had a lot of stamps, and they basically put them all over the envelope in the front, or maybe this is the back. It's hard to tell because the other side looks like this. More stamps on there, like baseball players, and also like the sea creatures on the other end. So that's
Can you actually pay for express mail?
yeah. They basically they were short $1, so they basically said like, oh, I have all these stamps, I want to use them. Yeah, we have like old stamps, they don't lose their value. Stamps that are 10 years old, you can still use them today. In some cases, like especially like stores or companies that would sell catalogs, they would accept stamps as payment for mailing you out the catalog. Because for a while was, at least in Germany, was kind of like considered equal, almost equal to currency. Not the grocery store wouldn't accept the stamps, but services, if the provider would accept that, they could be paid in stamps. Because they have to buy stamps anyway, they might as well do it this way, and that saves them a trip to the post office. And now with mail volume going down, it's no longer really of that interest. Also, stamps in general, you basically buy the stamp and you pay for a service that wasn't even rendered yet, which is why not just the US Postal Service, but a lot of other postal services now create those forever stamps. Yeah? Because that is, since they don't lose value, you can keep using them, but what happens is people go out and buy a whole roll. Or they say like, yeah, give me like 3 of those stamp books. And that's, at that point, it's cash in the pocket of the postal service. And other than print the stamp and hand it to you, they haven't done anything yet. So the more stamps you buy, the more money they get in earlier and render services like a year or 2 later. Yeah, they still have to do that, but they already get paid to get the money that much upfront. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to issue those forever stamps. There's a few other interesting things. I have like one, I guess, someone didn't have the envelope, so I didn't keep that, but someone put this on an envelope. It's like the Apollo Soyuz mission, like the whole block of stamps, and there's like those red postmarks on there. I think I wanted to mention that. How do they know that this stamp was already used? Those postmarks, they have iron in the ink. So they basically send that through like something with a magnet or a coil, and if it triggers, they know, hey, they need to check this. That probably someone tried to screw the postal service and put some already used stamp on there. That's how they know that if it was used or not. So if the postmark is not on there, then yeah, you can take the stamp off the envelope and use it again. Which, as a stamp collector, taking the stamps off the envelopes is like one of the things you have to deal with. And again, the US Postal Service is the exception here. They're the only postal service I know of that use adhesives that are not water soluble. Everyone else, you take the stamps on the paper, you throw them in some warm water, and like a few seconds later they come right off. Not so with US stamps, which kind of annoys the hell out of me. Because with those I need to use a citrus-based solvent like Glugon, like drench them in there, wait quite a long time, and then peel them off the paper. They get like all hard and crunchy, and I've like basically Glugon all over them. So in order to get that stuff off, I have to use soap water, like dish soap and warm water, and wash that off. But now my stamps are all soapy, so now I have to basically wash them off in clear water. And then there's still always like this adhesive on the back, so I have to use cornstarch to rub it on the back so that the stickiness goes away. Because otherwise, when I put them in the album, they just stick to the page, and if I ever want to move them, it wouldn't be possible. So it's quite a process to deal with the US stamps. It kind of takes the fun a little bit. So I still do it. Yeah. Yeah, it's like over time. There's an example. Still very popular. These first day covers. This is for the Olympic Games in 1972 in Germany. They have like a special mark, or like a graphic on the envelope, and then basically a special postmark that says like, okay, on the first day the stamp was issued, that was basically postmarked or cancelled at that specific post office. And yeah, again, more special editions. This is like special occasion. The Pope came to visit, so they issue stamps for that, and they basically sell those first day covers. So yeah, it's interesting how many there are, how much effort goes into them, and then also see one example. In Germany, more political influences there. So this is postmarked on June 26, 1954, so fairly quite almost 10 years after the war ended. But there's a stamp on there. It's like a little blue one. It's like says Not up for Berlin, two pfennigs, 2 cents. It was basically a kind of a tax on mail. Everyone had to put the stamp on there. The proceeds of that were used to rebuild Berlin. I mean, there were like tons of other cities that were as badly damaged as Berlin, but for political reasons. And that meant like the western part of Berlin. The eastern part, which was like the Soviet, western part, they basically pumped all that money, or a lot of money in there for reconstruction, economic well-doing, just to be basically the beacon against the Soviet bloc, political reasons. I mean, yeah, it was great for the people who lived there, but it's quite unique, well, interesting aspect there. This those extra payments, I haven't seen them from the US Postal Service yet, but a lot of European services issue stamps where you basically pay the face value, like let's say like 60 cents, whatever, plus 40. So overall you pay $1 for it, and the 40 cents basically are used for fundraising for a good cause. Red Cross, cancer research, or whatever else there would be. Basically use that to generate revenue for a good cause. And that's another way to do something good for the stamps. But there it's kind of like already upfront. You don't have to use them, so if you don't want to donate money, you don't have to do it. That's like one of the easiest ways to do it. And they generate quite a bit of money for these causes. And that's about all I can have to show. Any questions, concerns, complaints?
I was going to say how long have you been doing it? He asked, how did you get into it? It's kind of the same question.
I got into it because my dad did it. My cousin did it. My friends in school did it. Everyone back then, like 40 years ago, I'm somewhat old. It was at the downswing there. Like not everyone would do that, but it's like when my father grew up, every kid would have a stamp collection. That's what you do. It was one of the hobbies, and playing soccer in the streets and flinging stones across the river and things like whatever. So collecting stamps. I do this because I want to have something to do in winter. I don't do work in the garden because it's like covered in snow. It's basically work on this during. No, it's about to end the time we have available in order to do this. So yeah, that's how I got to that. It was just everyone else did it, and at some point someone gave me a stamp, like one of those albums, and just kept going with it. And yeah, I do this for almost 40 years.
In writing literature, they say, show, don't tell.
Yeah.
That's a good saying. You did a great job of showing. And
Thanks.
stories were well woven. If you were going to do it again, what do you think was the most impactful part of what you discussed? What do you think we responded to most, or maybe just what you enjoyed talking about?
What I enjoyed talking about most is just like to me the artistry that goes into all these stamps. Even whatever the reason is, there's like some artist was asked, or a lot of times they have it's like several artists, they basically bid for being the one selected. They send in proposals to be the one that has that stamp issued. I mean that people even specialize on that. I read an article about, it's like the German Postal Service has now a series of stamps about bridges, and the artists that were selected for that, they before they create the artwork, they want to take pictures of those bridges, and their intent was to have like special lighting, and I mean they can't. It's outside. They can't just put like whatever lighting in there they want. So they were hoping that they basically spent about a week in the city where those bridges are, and they want to hope for the good weather, or the weather that they want, and the time of the day that they need. So everything needs to come together perfectly, and then they take that picture. Probably take like 500 of them, but
Is it prestigious, or do they get paid a lot?
no,
So it's like just the
it's just for the honor. And
it's
being
it's funny. I don't think I've ever read literature about a story, fiction or otherwise, about a stamp or a story about a stamp. I think there was a movie a long time ago that was like intrigue about the one stamp that someone was trying to find. The one movie, if anyone's ever seen Fargo, there's this movie called Fargo, and it's a crazy movie. The woman is a police officer and goes on the whole journey of detective work, but her husband is that's his thing. He is very, very proud of his artwork, to submit it to be accepted as a stamp. And so at the very end of the movie, he says, "Hey, Margie," they selected the stamps. She said, "Oh, did you win?" He said, "No, so and so did." She said, "But I got 3 cents." And she was like, "That's great." And he says, "Yeah, it's just 3 cents." And she said, "No, everybody needs the 3 cents. When the price goes up, you won't need them." And it was just a sweet moment of how important it was to him, because he had the mallard duck that he had done his artwork. Had nothing to do with anything about their livelihood. It wasn't going to change their lives in any way. But the pride he took in getting that.
I mean, it's the same as being selected or asked to create a cover for a magazine.
I guess, but a cover for a magazine, you get paid. Right?
Yeah, I mean,
these guys actually do win prizes.
Yeah.
You can win the prize. The prize is that you get your stamp.
I know today they get, like, I mean, compared to what the effort is, it's not a well-paying job. But the ones who specialize on it tend to get repeats, like selected repeatedly. So I don't know if they can make a living on it.
Why do the postal services even bother with changing the design?
That's a very good question. I think it's stamps traditionally a lot of them are issued for specific very important events. So a lot of them are commemorative. 300 years this place, 500 years that place, 20 years this organization. So I basically issue that stamp to bring awareness or like honor to this. Sports events are, I don't know if it ever has a Super Bowl stamp or like a World Series stamp. I think, yeah, they have World Series stamps. But like Olympic Games, pretty much every country, even if they don't partake in it as much, although pretty much everyone, at least for the summer ones, a lot of countries do, they issue a stamp to basically say like, yeah, that's the event. We went there. We were represented. So those are reasons why they would pick specific ones. There are a lot of series out there that have get printed for several years, and they have typically have like either buildings on them or flowers or something very almost said generic, but nothing specific to events. So those are called series. Then they have series that are issued only for 1 year. So it's like a specific topic that they, for whatever reason, want to bring awareness to. There's like councils that basically select what the motives, what the pictures on those stamps will be. So like, I don't know how this works, but they get together and say, we should do one on ducks, or we like cats, so let's do cats, or I know one of their really cute stamps that Germany gave out a few years back. I still think that they still issue that series. Shows like baby animals, like little kittens, little horses or whatever else is there on there. So it's really they're just cute, basically, and that makes people want to buy that stamp, like not the boring one that they already seen. Oh, it's like, oh, did you see this? Or then just playing to specific interest. Like I know that my brother, he like who doesn't like the Beatles, but he I basically bought him the sheets of the U.S. Postal Service with the John Lennon stamps, and put that in a picture frame, and that was my Christmas gift for him. So in general, if you're ever short of a gift and you don't know what to give, you don't know that person, go to the post office. They have like all the stamps that they have available in the display case. It's like, oh, that one looks pretty. Tell them, oh, give me the entire sheet, put that in a frame, and there you go. So. Yeah.
So we're getting pretty close to our end time, so we don't have any more time for you guys. Would you guys, if you're able to come next time, and you want to come next time, you want to present. Sorry that we don't have time for this.
Thank you for presenting. I mean, to just highlight your point earlier when I asked my original question on why everyone was here, it was a great punctuation when you said that you wanted to be exposed to things you wouldn't voluntarily expose yourself to. So if there was a list of presentations that said, this is a talk about stamps, I wouldn't have signed up for that. I wouldn't have said, okay, I'm going to take my Saturday afternoon and come and listen to about stamps. And there was a lot of very interesting tidbits that I found a lot of value in. And your personal experiences of art, and then seeing how it had dual functions of art and history, and you can see patterns in time and location, was really neat to me. As part of my analytical side of me, I found that very interesting. I have a big relational experience, and seeing that you have a data stored collection that had a lot of relationships between time, location, and culture was really neat. And that you can almost digitize it and analyze it and data mine it. It was really cool. Just as a follow-up question, have you looked at scrapbooking people at all to enhance your collection? And the only reason I ask this is my wife is a scrapbooker. Mm-hmm. She has a group of which gets together in scrapbooks, and they document historical events in books, kind of like how you store your stamps, but they take it to an art form.
Yeah.
And you mentioned art, and art is very much the eye of the beholder, which, I mean, I would love to hear more about how you interpreted the art and how you experience it, because it's such a personal experience, and I like seeing how people engage with that kind of thing. So, I don't know, have you thought about scrapbooking? And if
No,
not,
I did
maybe
not.
take a look at the whole industry, because it's really neat.
For me, it's just the sheer variety and the artwork. Some of the stamps that come like bland, boring, but others there are. I mean, the flowers, just the blossoms that they put on there, just beautiful. Or even just art itself gets put onto stamps. Like 300 euros. I don't know, just pick any famous painter that you come up with. There's probably a stamp out there, and it's either this artist, if there was a picture of them, or at least their artwork is presented on that stamp. So it's
kind of put yourself into your collection. Make a page about Germany 1945, or and then create your own stories.
Yeah.
That's just a suggestion. It was really neat. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
My grandfather had he's dead now, but he had that, not too large, but like a small stamp collection. So I have a few stamps from him, but I mostly did the coin collection.
Yeah, I used to do coins for a while, but when I moved here from Germany, those were one of those things that were kind of, the albums are bulky, and since it's like all metal, they're very heavy, and it's like, I wasn't into that as much, especially since I no longer had easy access to the collection that I started with, the German coins. I still have some of those special edition coins that they're like basically made out of silver. They're issued for special occasions as well. And there's even crossover between philatelists and numismatics. Where they issue a coin and a commemorative stamp, like in an envelope together. So, like, numismatic is like the science of coin collecting, and philately, I think that's the word in English. It's basically the science of collecting stamps.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Good to meet you guys.